This is part 56 of my series on my N-Gauge model railway project. Previous parts covered the project from its inception through the creation of the baseboard, selection and laying of track, building of scenic items, obtaining rolling stock, etc. The project is ongoing. This part deals with the features and functioning of the Kato Soundbox. My layout runs on DC, not DCC, and I use the Kato Soundbox to provide sound. I think sound does add a lot to the atmosphere of a model railway, and I'm not really happy working with a model layout where I hear nothing but the whir of electric motors and bumping and clicking on the track. It just doesn't seem natural to me. Of course, if I could have gone with DCC and onboard sound, but I felt that DC and central sound would better address what I was looking for. Here you can see my control center, not the tidiest I'm afraid, but it's reasonably well organized and it works for me. There are two Kato Soundboxes here, as I have two separately powered control zones, and the track has to be powered through the Soundbox, so there has to be a Soundbox for each power zone. Each Soundbox has a corresponding Kato power controller for the zone to its left, and there are turnout switches connected between each power controller and the Soundbox, and also to the right of the right-hand Soundbox. The small separate controller at extreme right is the dedicated controller for the Kato-powered turntable. Mainly I want to show in this video how the Kato Soundbox works with steam engines. Since I'm modelling operations in the British Midlands in the 1930s, I'm working almost entirely with steam locomotives. I will also demonstrate the Soundbox with my one and only diesel loco at the end of the video. Unfortunately, currently no sound cards for the Kato Soundbox are made specifically for British locomotives. There are quite a number of cards for different types of Japanese steam locomotive and 2 cards for US steam locomotives. The US heavy steam card would not be useful to me as it models the FE, F3 and GS4 locos, which have noisy electric blowers, etc., which would be quite inappropriate for the locos I am using. I started out working with the US light steam card, which works quite well for me, except that it has very loud and repetitive ambient noise, which rather detracts from its value. As a result, I've tried pretty much the whole range of Japanese steam cards, and I will demonstrate all of them here, along finally with the first generation diesel card, which is the one that comes included with the Soundbox. Here's the back of one of my Soundboxes showing the connections. And here they are labelled. You will always connect your Soundbox to your track using the output power connector. This can of course be branched through 3-way connectors to supply various power points on the track. There is a connector on the back for Kato's Bluetooth control unit, which can be used along with its associated app to control the Soundbox, but I don't currently have that, so I won't be covering that in this video. If you're using the Soundbox with a regular DC controller, as I am, then the output from your controller, which would normally go straight to the track, is now connected to the Soundbox, as seen with the green plug at right here. The Soundbox requires its own power to operate. This can be provided by plugging the connectors on the left side of the Soundbox into the output terminals on the right side of a Kato controller. Alternatively, power can be provided through the power input on the back of the Soundbox, standard round connector 12 to 18 volts DC positive center. The Soundbox does not come with an adapter for this connection included. I do in fact have an adapter connected, as can be seen here, although it's not strictly necessary if the Soundbox is plugged in at the left-hand side. There are output terminals on the right-hand side of the Soundbox, which can be used to connect additional Kato items such as turnout switches. Power will only be available to these output connectors if the left-hand input connectors are connected. Here's that same Soundbox from the front with its associated controller and turnout switches. The Soundbox has a built-in speaker at right, which I find provides perfectly adequate sound. Everything you will hear in this video comes from the built-in speaker. If you're not satisfied with the sound provided by the built-in speaker, you can use the line-out connector on the front to connect the Soundbox to any standard audio amplifier, etc. You can also connect a microphone input to the front, which would allow you, for example, to make voice announcements through the Soundbox. The eject button at top left turns off the sound operations. This should always be done before unplugging the current sound card. The eject light will be off if no sound card is connected, green if a sound card is currently connected and working, or red to indicate a problem with the sound card connection. You can also just press the eject button to turn off the sound if you want to. The buttons numbered 1 to 6 trigger specific sound effects when pressed. These vary somewhat from card to card, and I will demonstrate with the different cards when running. The start knob controls the power level passed to the track. It needs to be adjusted to provide an appropriate power level for the locomotive currently in use. Older locos will generally require a higher start setting. If the higher start setting for older locos is left when a newer loco is put on the track, the loco will move even when the controller is at 0. It will be necessary to turn down the start knob until the loco stops moving. The sync knob controls the synchronization of sound effects with loco speed when moving. If the sound effects seem too slow, turn up the sync knob. If they are too fast, turn down the sync knob. The status light indicates whether the soundbox is functioning and supplying power to the track. It is green when power is being supplied and red when there is a problem, such as a short circuit or a derailment, and it's quite sensitive. Any little derailment or if a loco gets jammed for any reason, generally that light will turn red rapidly, which is good because it protects the power and protects everything. It switches power off so nothing gets damaged. If the status light turns red, it will be necessary to turn the controller down to 0, clear the problem on the track, such as re-railing the loco or whatever, and then turn the start knob all the way down and back up to the desired level. If the status light still turns red, you have not successfully cleared the problem and you'll need to repeat the procedure. Okay, now let's see a demonstration of the soundbox and the various sound cards that I have. Okay, let's try and have a look at the features and functioning of the Kato Soundbox. Well, that initial rumbling you can hear, if I can hear, if you can, or you can, that's a real train across the road, so that's nothing to do with the soundbox. I've got the soundbox sound turned off at the moment. Okay, so this is the soundbox here, and I've got it connected to my Kato controller, and I've got switches for turnouts on both sides of it. If you're going to use switches for turnouts plugged into this side of it, you must have it connected into power on this side. It has to be powered by something. It can either be powered from here or it can be powered from the power socket on the back. But if it's powered from the power socket on the back, you don't get any power coming out here for turnouts. So if you're going to put turnouts here, you've got to have power coming in from this side. I'm mainly using this for steam because almost everything I do is steam. We'll perhaps have one quick little look at the one and only diesel I've got at the end. But when you buy the soundbox, it comes with the first generation diesel card. You don't have any choice on that. You can get a choice of what card you want. So you're always going to have to buy another card for steam. The first card I bought was the US Light Steam card, which in some ways is one of the best. The big downside for me is the ambient noise. So we'll turn the US Light Steam card on and you'll see what I mean. That's the US Light Steam card, and it makes this noise, this sort of constant whistling and barking all the time when it's in idle mode. That's not the soundbox in general, that's the US Light Steam card. That to me is the big downside of the US Light Steam card. If it didn't do that, that would be my favorite card, because it definitely has the best brake sound and I quite like its engine sound, but I do find this kind of annoying. And the other, as you'll see when we get on to looking at other cards don't do that. The ringing is clocks chiming. So let's see how this sounds with an engine. This is the US Light Steam card. I've got a crab engine on there. And I've set up the start and sync so they work reasonably with this engine. These start and sync buttons here have to be adjusted appropriately. This is the start button, this is the sync button. The start button controls how much power goes to the line, and if you have it too high with modern engines, they'll just start off without you actually
operating the control at all. Conversely, if you have it too low, with older engines they won't go at all, so you have to adjust it to get an appropriate power level. Sync just adjusts the rate of this, essentially the rate of chuff for steam engines, so you'll get faster chuff for the same speed of engine if you turn the sync up, and slower if you turn it down. So let's just take the let's just take the crab here. Now you'll see as it goes faster, even if I don't increase the throttle, as it goes faster down the hill, it will chuff a little faster. And if I slow it down, it slows down. If I speed it up, it will speed up. Sorry, a lot of chiming now. Now I have to give it a bit more power to go up the hill, and as I give it more power to go up the hill, basically the cylinders beat faster and you hear it chuffing faster. Now let me just... That squeak there is the brake sound that you'll get, and I like that brake sound on the US Light Steam card. None of the Japanese Steam cards have anything like such a good steam sound. Now if I press that same button when the engine's standing still, I get a brake release sound. See, if it's moving, I get a brake squeak. If it's standing still, I get a brake release standing still. A squeak which lasts until I stop the engine if it's moving. The other buttons, one will always do your horn, your whistle or your horn. That's the default whistle for US Light Steam, not necessarily the most appropriate. You have, each card has usually 3 whistle sounds which you can get by pressing the 1 and 2 buttons together. You press the 1 and 2 buttons. And that's the bell. 2 is by default the bell. Okay, once that light is flashing, you can go through the different whistles by pressing the 1 button. So supposing we like that one best, then we press the 2 button, and then we'll get that when we press the 1 button. 2 is always a bell on the US Light Steam, which is basically useless for British stuff because we don't use bells on engines generally. 4 is the brake. 3 it says is the drain. You know, it's actually, yeah, that's cylinder cocks open basically, and then I close my cylinder cocks. So 3 basically mimics the cylinder cocks being open, which it's not that good really. It creates a sort of periodic hiss if you're running and a constant hiss if you're standing still. Don't really find it terribly useful, to be perfectly honest. 5 produces a coupling sound. This is on the US Light Steam. These vary slightly on other cards. And 6 produces a watering sound, which is frankly so subtle that you can hardly ever hear it. So I've never quite seen the point of that one, because it's almost impossible to hear. Okay, I'm going to turn off the... When I press the eject button, that basically... It doesn't stop power going to the line. I can still operate the line. I can still... The engine will still move. Famous last words, but it will. Now it's just because it sort of stuck. The engine will still move, but you don't get any sound when you press the eject button, and you're supposed to press the eject button to change cards. So let's change the card. Now that was the US Light Steam, which, as I say, I like, except for that loud, persistent ambient sound. This is what they call the C11 card, which is for a type of Japanese steam engine. Now you'll see, as soon as I put that on, you'll see it has a much subtler sort of ambient sound. It doesn't make anywhere near so much noise. It just makes a little bit of a hiss and this vague periodic knocking sound. And that knocking isn't constant. See, it'll just do that a bit and then it'll go quiet, then it'll do a bit of knocking again. So it's much less irritating, I find, the ambient sound than the US Light Steam. Now it again will have its whistles. Apparently that one only has 2 whistles. I know 2 does some kind of hiss on that. And I can't remember whether the brake is either 3 or 4. And here's a cold stoking sound there. On 6, and a water sound on. Yeah, that'll be the brake. That's the brake release, I believe. And that's the brake release. So anyway, let's try and move him a bit then. Now, quite a different kind of chuff sound, as you can see. Synchronized basically the same, because we've got the sync set the same, but it's just it sounds as if this is meant to mimic a 4-cylinder engine, basically. This is the C11 card. All the other cards I've got for Steam are for Japanese Steam, because they don't make any British Steam cards, and the only other American Steam card they make is what they call a large Steam, and it's for a type of engine with all sorts of compressors and things. Put the brake on. Oh, famous. I'm not quite sure which of those is meant to be the brake. This one, I guess. Yeah, I guess that's meant to be the brake. That's a weird brake sound. Okay. I actually just got that one, so I'm not very used to that particular card. This is the C12 C56 card. That was the C11 card that we just heard. This is the C12 C56 card, which I've had for longer and used quite a bit. Its ambient sound isn't that different. It's fairly quiet with a little bit of periodic knocking and whatever. It's also not that different to the C11 in terms of chuffing. That's his brake. It's a sort of grating kind of sound, his brake. We won't stop him on the point because that could cause problems. We'll take him past the points to a straighter section of track. Never a great idea to brake engines on points. We'll brake him again here. Not the famous last words, that's not the brake, is it? getting confused now. Which of these is the brake? That's the brake. There, you can hear that sort of grating sound. And then it'll stop when he stops, and when you press the brake button when he's standing still, you get a brake release sound. Similar sort of coupling sound, slightly different. Oh no, that's not a coupling, I beg your pardon. Telling what half these sounds are meant to be is hard work. That's not a coupling sound, that's a watering sound. And that's a coal stoking sound. I don't even know what that's supposed to be. It's a vague hiss you get as long as you press the right button. The default whistle on the C12 is rather an American style whistle. And what choices do we get? A higher pitched one. They're all pretty much I think I probably prefer that one if I was going to do it. Go around once more with a C12. I've actually used this quite a bit and I don't mind it. I don't like the brake sound very much though. I mean, I much prefer the kind of squeak brake sound that you get with the light steam card, but unfortunately none of the Japanese steam cards have a brake sound like that. They all have more like grinding kind of brake sounds. Right. Okay. So let's eject that. And now I'm going to try the C57 C59 card, which I've also had for a while. This is another Japanese steam engine card, fairly large engines, I think these are meant to be. Now again, this has fairly quiet ambient sound. Basically, all of the other steam cards, other than the US light steam, have fairly quiet ambient sound. I've got a US light steam card in the other soundbox. I'll just turn the US light steam on to remind you what that's like. See, that's the US light steam, that constant whistling and barking. Whereas with the Japanese steam, you've just got this fairly quiet sound. This is the C57 C59. See again, now this is, again I think it's 4-cylinder, but it's a distinct sort of, it's a chuffing sound, very, very sort of chuffy rather than barky. Again, I've used this quite a while. I had this as my default card on my inner circuit for quite a while, so I'm quite used to this now. I must say, when I first heard it, I thought it sounded a bit strange, but I've sort of got used to it, I guess. Let's bring him up the hill, where he needs a little bit more power. And then we'll try and see where the brake is. Yeah, that's the brake. That low sort of grating sound is the brake. You never quite know from one card to another, and I find it have trouble remember. Some have the brake on 4, it's always on 3 or 4, but some have the brake on 4, some have the brake on 3. So if the brake's on 3 here, what's 4? I don't know what that's supposed to be. Some sort of strange, sort of squeaky and sucky sound. I don't know what that's meant to be quite honest. Five sounds like a watering sound. And 6 is a coal stoking sound. It's like shoveling coal. And if you want a make some noise for your fireman shoveling coal, although I don't know whether you'd hear that. You have to be pretty close to the engine to hear that. 2 is the same as the previous one, the C1256. It's just a sort of constant hiss as long as you keep it pressed. And here's the default whistle on the C5759. It'll make you sit up, eh? Okay, and what else do we have? Oh, a sort of nice sort of rising distant sound. Actually, again, you only have the 2 apparently on that. Some of them have 3. I think I like the rising distant one better, so we press 2 to fix that, and now when we press 1 we'll get the rising distant one. Alright, let's release the brake and go one more time round with this one. This is the Japanese Steam C57 C59 card, which I do use quite a bit. I don't like its brake sound as much as the US Light Steam, but I find it hard to put up with that annoying constant ambient sound with the US Light Steam. We'll put his brakes on. Brake sound, I'm afraid, does nothing for me, but anyway. Okay, so let's eject him. As soon as we press the eject button, the sound turns off. And we'll put in the last tier of the Japanese cards, the Japanese Steam cards, the D51. I know nothing about Japanese steam engines, I'm afraid, so I don't know the engines these cards are meant to mimic. I'm just using them as possible alternate cards. If they release British steam cards, of course I'd buy those, but they don't. Again, very quiet ambient sound, probably the quietest of all of them, hardly any ambient sound, just a slight sort of whistle and well, there you go, after a little while it does a bit of a knock. No. Knocking quite a bit there, but then it stops. And see, yes, that's the thing, the ambient sound can have quite a long profile. See, it seems like the ambient sound on this guy is, it's always going to be kind of basically a loop, but it's a fair amount of almost silence, just with a slight whistle and then some vague knocking and whatever. To me, that's quite unobjectionable, and it's even the knocking is quite soft. It's that constant loud barking that you know, this. The US Light Steam just does that all the time, and I don't care for that. Anyway, so let's hear the chuff sound, the engine sound on the D51. They mostly seem to be 4-cylinder engines, these Japanese engines, but actually, really, I can put up with it, though I'm not, as you've probably gathered by now, I'm not a super nitpicker. It just sounds vaguely acceptable. This is a very sort of deep sort of sound you get on this one. And again, I haven't had this long, so I've not really had a chance to get used to this one. The D51 and the C11 just came recently, so I'm not really used to them. The C12 and the C56 I've been using for a while. The C1256 and the C5759. And again, he has this sort of grating, humming kind of brake sound, which does nothing for me. You know, I probably would never use it because I just don't like it. A hiss on 2. Not quite sure what that's meant to be. Watering sound on 5. Shoveling sound on 6. No coupling sound on these. Some of them they put coupling sounds, this they don't. And there's his default whistle. And let's see what alternate whistle we got on him. Ah. See, he has 3. A 2-tone. He has the well, time's running on here, I guess. Let me just show you a couple of other... I just want to make a couple of other points here. Okay. That's the crab. To save time, I'm just going to take the crab off here. Now, this is a Ginty. This is a current production Graham Farish Ginty. If I put this on the track now, it's probably just going to run right away because it doesn't need anywhere near as much power. So, yes, see, it doesn't. In order to stop it doing that, I have to turn the start button down because he needs very little power. So I have to turn the start button down to stop him moving. Or conversely, you can start it at the bottom and turn it up till it starts moving. I'm turning the sync button down now. Now the other thing I want to show you is what happens if you run an engine into a point that's against it. What happens if you run an engine into a point that's against it? Oh, I don't know whether you can actually... Oh yes, you can just about see. The red light there is flashing. This is the red light behind the sync button. Flashes. And to reset that situation, that's because the Soundbox has reset itself. It will do that whenever an engine gets stuck. Turn the power down to 0, which is reasonable. Clear the stop, and then turn the start button all the way down and back up again. Now the camera's running out of power, so I've got to turn it off. Okay, now I've put a new battery in the camera, and just to finish off, I want to demonstrate my one and only diesel, which is a little Lms Diesel Shunter, because I don't really do diesel. I'm modelling the 1930s, and there weren't a lot of diesels around in the 1930s, but this is one type of diesel that was around in the 1930s, a little Lms Shunter. So we press the eject, and we'll take out the D51 steam card, which we got in there, and now what I'm going to put in here is the first generation diesel card, which is the card you're going to get with the Soundbox when you buy it, whether you like it or not. That's the one they put in. Now this, the diesel works totally different to steam. They made it work utterly differently, so it's a little confusing. When I press the button on there, the engine of the diesel is going to spool up. That's the engine spooling up. Now the engine is sort of controlled by button 3. If I press button 3, famous last words, the engine will spool down and stop. And when the engine is stopped, the engine, no matter what you do with the power, I got full power on now, nothing happens because the engine is stopped. And that's reasonable. The engine is stopped. Now, so let's start the engine, because you have to have the engine started for it to move. But even when the engine is started, we let the engine spool up. With a diesel, it will not start to move as soon as you apply power. It has a sort of momentum system, so you have to wait quite a while after you apply power for it to start to move, and then when you take power off, it will continue to move for a while. So we'll give him about 75% power now and just wait, and he should go, famous last words. Oh, I guess I've got the start button turned down too low for him because I had the start button. Okay, hang on. I had the start button turned down for the Ginty. Okay, so now let's try. Persuading diesels to move, I find, can be a little difficult. There we go. Oh, well, he wasn't. That was the contact problem. There he goes. Now, he's getting less power there. That famous there. And now he's doing the thing because he's run into a point that's against him. I don't know whether I can clear him. Can I clear him there without going over? No. He's still stuck. Yeah, he's still stuck. He's still stuck on that point. Now he should be clear, hopefully. I find getting diesels to do anything, frankly, hard work. Hang on. I'm going to turn the sound card off. If I turn the sound card off, now I'm just applying power directly to the thing without anything, and it's still not moving. So there you go. That tells me that the problem is that the engine itself isn't moving. Yeah. Oh, it's still stopping. I don't know. Well, the point should be set right now. I don't know. I'm having problems with the point, and the diesel is hard to operate at the best of times. No, that point is still set. Why is that point still set? That point is still set to turn. Oh. Because I've still got it set to turn. Famous last words. Now we've reset the point. Okay. Let's try one more time. Sound card on, motor on. Power. And wait and see if the thing consents to move. Let me just show you something. If I turn the sound card off, famous, yes, see, it works fine. This engine works perfectly fine without the sound card. But trying to induce it to work with the sound card, it's not impossible, but it's hard. Give him about a little over 60% power and 60% sync, and then we'll turn the throttle up to about 75% and see if he'll consent to move. Yes, well, he's going backwards, but that's okay. That's because that's the direction I take him. See, now he will start to move. See, he'll eventually move quite quickly. I didn't increase the throttle at all there. I am thinking, in fact, I'm now going to decrease the throttle because he's going faster and faster and faster. Oh. And we'll put his brake on. Famous lesson. And he has the same nice sort of squeaky brake as the US Light Steam. Okay, so now we're going to go the other way, turn power up to 75% and wait. And if we're lucky, maybe he'll consent to move. Yep, see, he's starting to move, but you really have to wait a long while for him to start to move. And then I'm not touching the power, and he'll go faster and faster and faster and faster until he's zooming round. So I'm going to reduce the power a bit. Very strange the way diesels work, I find. And now if I cut the power completely, he stops reasonably quickly, but he drifts for a while. Power up again. No, there. See, I've got power at 75%, but he takes a while before he starts off. I find it and if you're trying to shunt trains, it's a devil to try and shunt trains with a thing when it responds as slowly as that. And the brake. And of course, I was trying to brake him here, and he goes way the heck past there, because it's just very hard to persuade him. Now I've got him with power the other way, I'm trying to bring him back. And he will eventually come. But you've certainly got to think in advance to persuade the diesel to work. Anyway, there we are. I only just got the diesel, and I only just started trying to work with the diesel. Mostly I'm working with the steam, and generally I'm happy with it. I just wish that turn the steam card off a minute. I just wish that's the ambient noise from the US light steam. I just wish the US light steam wasn't so noisy in its ambient sound. Otherwise I'd be using that more. I still use it quite a bit, but I use the C12, C56 and C57, C59 cards quite a bit because they're just so much quieter ambiently.